A good Sunday morning to you, wherever you're watching us from. This is Inside Politics here on KTN News, Kenya's premier Sunday morning political broadcast. Now, yesterday, the Ministry of Health announced the highest number of new coronavirus infections yet to be confirmed within a period of 24 hours. A grim milestone with more than 600 new cases of COVID-19. Yet a lot of Kenyans, led by their political leaders, continue to flout COVID-19 containment measures. Police dramatically dispersed a political gathering in the county of Vihiga yesterday, while two other political gatherings continued uninterrupted at the same time. Nairobi Senator Johnson Sakaja, who is the chair of the Senate committee watching COVID-19, was found breaking rules he helped make. Police say they found him in a bar at 1 o'clock in the morning. We put a spotlight on the political class for putting the lives of Kenyans at risk. Meanwhile, in Parliament, the lines couldn't be more blurry if they tried. The latest Jubilee onslaught on Deputy President William Ruto's allies has seen the majority Jubilee party cede some leadership of key parliamentary committees to the minority side. We take an in-depth look at the incestuous relationship between the legislature and the executive. Who will provide oversight over the executive? In the meantime, the ties that once bound the so-called dynamic duo, President Uhuru Kenyatta and DP William Ruto, snapping a bit more. We're hearing of plans by Kenyatta to kick out some Ruto allies from the party. But where did the rain start beating them? Remember, as always, we'll give you a chance to call in with your views, comments and questions on our debates today. Stand by to have the last say. My panel is here to help me dissect the biggest political and policy issues in the Republic. I am Ben Kitili, and I'm joined by my colleague from the Standard senior reporter, Roslyn Obala, political risk analyst Dismas Mokua, communication strategist Mark Bichachi, and lawyer Ishmael Nyaribo. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Many thanks for joining me. We'll get into the discussions very shortly. Let's get into it. Now, yesterday, police lobbed tear gas to disperse politicians allied to Deputy President William Ruto, who had attended a public event at the home of Hamisi Member of Parliament Charles Gimose in Vihiga. Curiously, two other meetings led by Cabinet Secretary Eugene Wamalwa and Kakamega Senator Cleophas Malala in Kakamega and Bungoma went on as planned. Let's begin with KTN's Willie Lusige in Western Kenya.
In what is now becoming a trend, police again thwarted an attempt by Tangatanga wing allied to the Deputy President William Ruto to hold a meeting in Vihiga County at Hamisi MP Charles Gimose's home. A hostile police machinery was deployed, lobbing tear gas canisters at the crowd, with attendees led by former Kakamega Senator Boni Khalwale disappearing in nearby farms to save their lives. When things got thick, the DP allies abandoned the meeting, accusing police officers of applying double standards by preventing them from holding political meetings.
Na sisi hapa 50 people, kwa sababu sisi tuna support Deputy President, they don't want us to do consultations.
As Tangatanga team in Vihiga sobbed, in Bungoma County, the Luhya Youth Movement held peaceful and calm meeting with pomp and splendor at the ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna's home and pledged to work with the other team led by CS Eugene Wamalwa to champion youth agenda.
Tunaunga mkono viongozi ambao wamewekwa pale wawe wasemaji wa jamii ya Mulembe.
Let us not be misused. Vijana, we have been reduced into blockers, into WhatsApp admin. Let us not be that cheap.
Mimi kwa hekima yangu, mimi ninaona tuunge mrengo wa BBI mkono kama vijana wa Western Region.
In Kakamega at the Masinde Muliro University, CS Eugene Wamalwa-led team allied to the Building Bridges Initiative BBI held a meeting with the teachers, the team saying their criticism was part of the fight for the region's development and not scrambling to become the Luhya community spokespersons.
Ati sisi sasa tunaharibu mambo ya Waluhya. Sasa Waluhya hapa tunaharibu nini? Jameni, nyinyi mko hapa mmeketi. Nini tumeharibu hapa? Wewe kama umeshindwa kufanya kazi, sema umeshindwa kufanya kazi.
For the time that we have, the 2 years, what can we do to serve our people and change the lives of our people? That is the true test of leadership. And that is why we're here today, to ask you to work with us so that we can serve our people better, so that we can enable them get the share ya serikali hii.
Singing the Luhya unity mantra, Governor Wycliffe Oparanya accused the Tanga team of not following COVID-19 containment measures, thus inviting the wrath of the police.
We want as leaders to come together and focus on how we are going to ensure that any amendments that will be done in the BBI is for the interest of the people of Kenya and specifically our region.
It is high time that we have leaders, new breed of leaders, emerge in Western Kenya.
So what I will request my other colleagues, if they want to have a meeting, they must follow the COVID protocol.
It's a matter of time to wait and see among the three remaining political factions which one will be able to lure the people of Western for their political support. Willie Lusige, KTN News in Kakamega.
All right, Mark Bichachi, let me come to you. Let me start with you. These political meetings, it seems almost impossible to, observe those social distancing and whatnot. What is your take on the political gatherings that we are seeing that seem to be putting the lives of Kenyans at risk?
Ben, you know my stand on Luhya unity. I do not think it is a necessity, but on top of that, we are also exposing these same Luhyas to catching COVID-19 for a very unnecessary exercise. It is not like Luhya land is in some form of crisis simply because it does not have a presidential candidate or because it is not voting as a bloc. In fact, democracy dictates that they should be allowed to make their own decisions. So I vehemently oppose these gatherings, especially during this COVID time. And I also oppose the idea that one side of the political class can have meetings when the other can't. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. So whereas I am a strong supporter of the BBI, I am not a supporter of how the Luhya politics seems to favor certain politicians during COVID and not others during COVID. And given that some of the people who are talking in these platforms are governors and some of them are in cabinet, they should take responsibility and realize that they need to stay home. Because for me, the only difference between how they are acting and how Sakaja acted over the last 2 days is simply the bottle of alcohol. But they're doing the very same thing, which is flouting laws and putting people in danger, which should not be allowed, and for no reason at all. I do not understand why Luhya unity is suddenly an emergency in 2020 when it was not in 2019 or 2017.
Rosalind, this seems to be happening largely in Western Kenya, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, we are seeing most of these political meetings in Western region. You remember there was also a time that there was a meeting at Malulu Injeni, the Malavaga MP's home. The same incident happened where the Tanga leaders were tear gassed. And just what Mark Bichachi is saying, we don't see the urgency why we are having now these tribal cocoon meetings, because we've seen them held in Busia, we've seen meetings in Kakamega, we have seen meetings in Busia, Bungoma and also Vihiga. So as much as they are pushing for the BBI report, which is yet to be released, I think our leaders should take this process of COVID mitigation a bit higher and serious, because we've just talked about the numbers, the highest ever that were released yesterday, that was 688. If our political class take this matter serious, then I think they will caution the public. But when we see that our leaders are the ones leading in the forefront in terms of gatherings and political movements, then I think this war on COVID is just starting.
Ishmael, let me come to you. Welcome back to the show. It's been a while. Now, many Kenyans have been, talking about what's happening in the United States, where the president, Donald Trump, has been caught between a rock and a hard place, preparing for that election. But he has been accused of not taking the COVID-19 pandemic seriously. But back home, it seems to be the same thing. Do you think there is political responsibility over the management of this pandemic?
Yeah, there is political responsibility, but more again, there is a state and government responsibility in ensuring that the infections are not perpetrated and facilitated by their action or inaction. I support the fact that the government should disperse any groups meeting in large crowds, because the infections, by the way, are not in any way considerate of political or religious or any other considerations. The infections are lethal and they will affect anybody. If you've mentioned the United States, in the past week we received reports that, we got reports that about 60,000 people were infected in one day. And you remember demonstrations which came in because of the George Floyd's death. I mean, it doesn't matter what is the reason for gathering. It will still infect everybody who is at least exposed to it. And you have seen not only political gatherings, Ben. If you look at the burial of Ohangla musician who died about 2-3 weeks ago, the police dispersed people. Yesterday, we again saw in Migori during a burial of another musician. You saw the kind of crowd we had. So I think it's not about criticizing the government here. I think the government should be criticized for not dispersing the crowds like those ones which were attended by the Honorable Paranya and the others. So it is not a question of just dispersing the crowd at William Ruto supporters. I support the fact that everybody should actually be dispersed and made sure to stay at home or at least maintain serious social distancing.
Okay. Ishmael, we're not criticizing the government. We are putting the spotlight on the politicians, the political class, because we get a feeling they need to be setting some kind of example. Do you think, as much as Kenyans may be struggling with this issue of, whether to get out, how not to gather, because they have to continue their daily activities, do you think the political class have a bigger responsibility of setting an example?
They have a huge responsibility, because when you look at the Kenyan situation, these politicians you are talking about also head governments. Like, for instance, Governor Oparanya is the head of the county government of Kakamega. So the behavior of these politicians is actually a threat to our national security, because COVID is a threat to our national security, and these leaders are behaving in a manner that they can actually catalyze the spread of COVID. And we must call them out every single day the sun comes from the east and tell them that we find their behavior unacceptable. You've just mentioned what has been happening in the US and what has happened in Brazil, that when leaders behave in a manner which is irresponsible, then the population follows exactly what they're doing. So we cannot sit back and have these leaders, especially the governors from Western Kenya, calling meetings every single day, and they do not respect the COVID protocols and procedures. And the CS for Health has indicated in black and white that you save me, I save you. If somebody gets infected in Kakamega, we'll feel the impact at a place called Mososho in Kisii and a place Lamu at the coast. So we cannot sit back and say, these are our leaders, they're immune. And the strange thing is, these are the same leaders who come up with the COVID protocols. They're telling us we need to behave in a particular manner. We need to maintain social distance, sanitize, and wash our hands on a regular basis. They've come up with these rules. They read them every single day at the Senate, National Assembly, and in these rallies. But they're the first people to break them. So it's unacceptable. Like, for instance, the behavior of the Nairobi senator is the head of the select committee at the Senate, is assisted in crafting some of these regulations, and is the first person to break these rules and procedures. So for the rest of Kenyans, what are we expected to do? And in my view, the president must call out on these leaders, whether they are members of his cabinet like Eugene Wamalwa, or they are governors like Oparanya, and tell them that this behavior is unacceptable. Because you cannot have a CS Kagwe every single day addressing this issue, calling out on these leaders, and then they keep on breaching this. And as a nation, as law-abiding citizens, we begin to wonder, that do we have two sets of rules in Kenya? One for the politicians, and then one for Mora. If Mora dares breach any of these protocols, Mora will find herself behind bars. But for these leaders, they break the procedures with reckless abandon, and then they start claiming that it's Mora who is indisciplined. For me, I think this is unacceptable, and it's the right time for both President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga to call their sycophants and troops to order and tell them that we are not sure whether we are going to have a nation 2022. So why are they in a hurry to be doing campaigns today?
On the other hand, Rosalind, the Building Bridges Initiative report is said to be presented to the president, we are told anytime. This means there will be need to, drum up support for it. Where is the future of this in terms of, before the COVID-19 pandemic, we had the BBI rallies. How will the proponents of the BBI, drum up support for it?
Ben, if you look at it, I don't think this is a time for us to have the big rallies, because remember we had the BBI task force, which was later renamed the steering committee. Now, the mandate of this committee was to validate the views that they were getting based on the report that they had actually earlier released. So in this case, I don't think this calls for many rallies. I think once the report will be out and we've had the principals talk about it and the leaders talk about it, that it will be implemented in 3 stages. We will have the administrative process, we will have the parliamentary process, and that is why we've seen the purge that is happening now in Parliament to ensure that they have the committees in place to ensure that whatever comes through the parliamentary process actually is passed. And then the third one, we are going to have the referendum question. Or the question is just how will it be crafted, which maybe now that will be part of the issues that will be contained in the report which will be released. The report was supposed to be released end of last month, but if you look at the Gazette notice, they say that either on June 30th or any time that will be available or availed by the president and his co-principal Raila Odinga. Right. So in this case, I don't think that the leaders can go and hang up in the issue that we are going to again campaign for the BPI, unless maybe now what they will be doing is now to educate Kenyans to understand which are these issues that will be going, which are the sections that are protected in law. We are talking about the structure of governance, which must go to the people. We are talking about increase of allocation to counties, that is according to Article 203, which must also go to the people because they are proposing to increase allocation from the 15% to 35%. We don't know if it will touch on Chapter 15, that is the constitutional offices and independent offices, which again will require the people to take a vote, and maybe some of the other proposals that might come in that report. Okay. So again, our political class must cluster themselves that whatever they are going to do must be in line with the Ministry of Health guidelines and not expose the public even as they ventilate and escalate their political issues.
All right, we are putting the spotlight on the political class, and Dismas and Mark did mention something. And Nairobi Senator Johnson Sakaja has been in the middle of a storm disputing reports of his arrest Friday night, drunk and disorderly, past curfew hours. Muremi Mwangi reports on the night of drama that saw the senator, who ironically chairs a committee on COVID-19 response, on the wrong side of the law.
The amateur video allegedly recorded by a police officer at Kilimani police station showing Nairobi Senator Johnson Sakaja behind bars. A signal dispatch from the station indicating that the senator had, in the company of some other 10 people, been caught drinking around 1:30 a.m. at a club along Dennis Street Road, long past the 9 p.m. curfew hours and COVID-19 regulations that prohibit opening of bars. In the dispatch, police claimed the senator became disorderly. It is alleged Sakaja threatened to instigate the transfer of all the officers at the Kilimani police station, despite having been offered a free police bond. The senator was later released, but it turns out the incident was never booked in the police occurrence book. Sakaja later turned to Twitter to refute reports of his arrest, challenging anyone reporting of his apprehension to produce a NOBI number. Kenyans, including some of his colleagues at the Senate, seemingly angered by events of the night. The senator was unavailable on phone for comment by the time of going on air. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News.
Rosalind, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding what happened on Friday night. Sakaja saying he was not arrested, he has never been arrested, and challenging anyone saying that to provide an OB number. And we tried yesterday in vain to get the police in Kilimani to tell us what really happened. Was it booked?
Yeah, according to the officers at Kilimani station, the senator was booked and was released in the morning at around 8. And if you remember, there were other people that were also arrested alongside the senator who had actually been retained there. And if you look at one of the lawyers who are representing them, that is Cliff Ombeta, he was actually urging the senator to present himself so that the others can also be released. And if you look at the amateur video, also shows the senator had been arrested. The question is that he's the chair of the ad hoc committee on Senate that is dealing with COVID affairs issues. And this just raises concerns because he's been calling leaders, the CS Health, Security, CS Matiang'i, to just discuss the regulations and the guidelines that they're using on COVID. And now he's one of the people that are actually going against the same guidelines that they are ensuring are adhered to.
All right. Ishmael, what's your take on this?
On this, I agree entirely. It is quite irresponsible for both politicians to drum up support publicly, calling for public gatherings in terms of the BPI. And also the Honorable Sakaja is a responsible citizen. And the reports coming from the media, at least what we have seen, is the police tried to urge him actually to walk out of the club at 1 or so in the morning. These are reports. And he refused. And I think it took quite a bit of consulting by the time they had to physically arrest him and take him to Kilimani police station. So whether he refutes that this happened or not, in reality it is quite irresponsible for our leaders to ignore that the pandemic is real. So on this one I agree that leaders and politicians especially should actually come out and support the stopping of the pandemic instead of aggravating the infections.
Dismas?
Whether or not he was booked is not material at this stage. The material thing is that there's a curfew which is supposed to take place at 9 o'clock, and we understand according to public health regulations, bars are not supposed to be open. Actually, it's only restaurants which are supposed to be open. So the fact that the Honorable Sakaja is the architect of these COVID rules and procedures in Kenya with the rest of his colleagues in the Senate and National Assembly, and they've got overwhelming influence on how the nation is run, it's unacceptable for such kind of a leader to behave in that reckless and irresponsible manner. Because when he behaves in such a manner, then the rest of the Kenyans, especially people in Nairobi, would think it's a best practice. And we've had comments elsewhere suggesting that the Nairobi governor is having altercations with the law enforcement officers, and then another MP from Nairobi is having an altercation with the law enforcement officers, and then now you have the Nairobi senator having an altercation with the law enforcement officers. So people begin to wonder, what kind of leaders do we have in Nairobi, and then what kind of voters do we have in Nairobi? And the behavior of these politicians, as indicated earlier on, is a threat to our national security. And it gets more depressing that these leaders are doing this on taxpayer resources. So you fund them at the National Assembly and Senate to come up with the COVID procedures, and then you fund them as they break the same rules they've created. And there's an old Latin saying that in vino veritas. Now, we understand that some of these leaders, maybe in the evenings they consume alcoholic beverages, then we begin to see their true colors. And I think it's up to the leaders to step to the bar and indicate that they're going to raise the bar, especially on issues of Article 10 and Chapter 6. Because a casual reading of Chapter 6 and Article 10 does not allow leaders to behave in this manner. If you get a private citizen called Wakesho behaving in this manner, then maybe they would be excused. But when you're a state officer and you're a public officer, the society expects more from you. And there's a valid expectation that all these politicians, not just limited to the Honorable Sakaja, all of them, including Honorable Boni Khalwale, who has become a firefighter, including Oparanya and Eugene, that they must be called to order. The COVID is a threat to our national security. And I don't know whether these leaders understand that because of this COVID, people are committing suicide, businesses are being closed, there are mental issues, divorces, and a lot of violence. Instead of these leaders pulling in the one direction so that we flatten the curve in a hurry, right, and then we go back to economic opportunities, they're actually catalyzing the spread of the COVID. And I'm wondering, who in the political leadership in Kenya is going to call them out? Will President Kenyatta call them out? Will Raila call them out, or is it going to be business as usual as Murad bleeds to death?
All right. Why do you call Halwale a firefighter? Is it because of the bucket of water he was carrying yesterday? Was that for putting out the fire?
Well, he indicated, at least from the sound bites, that a tear gas had been lodged somewhere and it caused a fire, so he was going to manage that fire. That's why I referred to him as a firefighter.
Mark, you did mention this issue of Sakaja earlier. Shed more light on your argument. He says he has never been arrested.
You know, Sakaja is a friend of mine, and I am very, very disappointed in how he's handled himself. Number one, in flouting the rules. But number two, in refusing to cooperate with the lawful execution of regulations that he himself has put in place. Then number three, the fact that he would leverage his position to threaten police officers that they will be transferred, which means simply punishing them for the high crime of touching a VIP. Beyond that, the fact that he would go on Twitter to deny it instead of issuing an apology, then in one night he has done everything wrong that African leaders do. What is that? Number one, putting himself above the law. Number two, being remorseless about what he has done, feeling absolutely nothing, no apology, no realization that he's basically letting down the youth that he represents. All of those things are sad, sad affairs. But also, if you put it in the context of COVID-19, and you imagine what example our leaders are giving to young people, and with the likelihood that deaths in this country are going to hit the double digits very soon, then you realize that this is a leader that has abandoned his leadership position. And if I was going to advise him, and Sakaja, you're my friend, I'm telling you for free, what I would do is I would write a very long apology to the people of Kenya based on my conduct. That's what he needs to do. And Eugene and Bonnie Halwale and all of these people, including Sudi, who was shaking hands with a very elderly lady during this COVID period, need to take this issue seriously and apologize to Kenyans and change forthwith.
All right, thanks. That's nuts. Let's take a quick commercial break here on Inside Politics. When we come back, we shall be taking a look at what has been described as an incestuous relationship between the legislature and the executive, the latest of it being the majority party, Jubilee Party, ceding some of its leadership position in committees in Parliament, including the all-important Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly, to the minority side. So who will provide oversight over the executive in parliaments? Stay with us.
Safari hii ya mavivyo vyote kama vile umeambiwa na Bwana Miradi, tumeshaungana, tumeshatengeza hiyo Alliance for National Development, National Alliance of Kenya, na itakuwa tutaweka candidate moja peke yake, ikiwa ni hapa kwetu tutakuwa na candidate moja kwa Alliance, tukienda huko Tigania tutakuwa kwa candidate moja, kila mahali tutakuwa candidate moja kwa hii halmashauri yote ya maeneo yote. Kwa hivyo pale tulikuwa tunagawanya, hatutakuwa safari hii, itakuwa ni moja, tutashindane na wale kani nao watakubaliana, na tunawaombea Mungu wajaliwe, wakubaliane na waweze kuwa tayari. Lakini hakuna ubaya baina yetu, lazima tusaidiane na kila wewe muombee jirani yako naye apate kufaidika